I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. On January 5th, 1949, a UN commission unanimously enshrined Kashmiri's right to self-determination. Since then, however, India refused to demilitarize and created a long-standing political stalemate. In the 70-odd years, India has enforced draconian laws, carried out arrests, rapes, and other forms of suppression of the local Kashmiri population. Why does India refuse to give Kashmiris their right to determine who rules over them? To discuss that and a lot more, we're joined now by Mohammad Faisal, who is a journalist joining us live from Istanbul. He was born in Srinagar in Kashmir, and he's also a blogger. We're also joined by Anuradha Bhasin Jamal, who is a journalist based in Jammu, and she is the executive editor of Kashmir Times. Thank you both for joining us. Mohammad, I'll start with you. How do you reflect now 7 decades later after Kashmiris were given the right to self-determination?
Well, it's 7 decades since the United Nations ruled on 5th of January 1949 that Kashmiris should be granted the right to self-determination, which is administered by a plebiscite administrator, which calls for a referendum where Kashmiris decide their political future, whether to go with India and Pakistan. 7 decades later, Kashmiri's political landscape and the Kashmiri's movement for independence has always been shaped by these UN resolutions, which not only gives them a recognition of the struggle, but also recognizes them as people. It also recognizes our struggle being indigenous, having a historical and legal background. But at the same time, over the years, the United Nations resolutions are not enforced because these are not enforceable resolutions. And in 1974, when Shimla Agreement took place between India and Pakistan, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, while negotiating with the Indian government, basically bartered away our United Nations resolutions self-determination in a war where we weren't even a part of. So over the years, recently Imran Khan has made some political statements which basically have tried to shake the status quo that has been enforced by the 1974 Shimla resolutions.
Right.
Kashmiris do not want to be caught in this quagmire which we have been in the last 7 decades, and they want the end of status quo so that their political future is recognized and they can live a life with dignity and peace.
Do you think that both sides are responsible for the situation? I imagine Pakistan would argue, listen, we would want the Kashmiris to determine their own future, and that's what Pakistan has been pushing for.
The lack of execution of this United Nations resolutions. If Pakistan has been calling for the right to self-determination for Kashmiris, but at the same time, 7 decades later, there are far more troops in Kashmir than there were in 1947. India's argument being in 1948, when they took to the United Nations Security Council, was that there are Pakistani tribesmen and what they alleged to have Pakistani troops inside the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. But at the same time, the Pakistani argument was that there are a lot of Hindu militias which have been imported from the other Indian states like Punjab, mostly from the RSS.
If I can get Anuradha in on this. Anuradha, I wanted to, for a moment, just if you allow me, go back to the many laws that have been brought into place in Jammu and Kashmir, and we can talk about the Armed Forces Special Powers Act and the Public Safety Act, and many people saying that those sorts of laws essentially give cover to Indian forces to do as they wish when it comes to Kashmir. What do you make of that?
Definitely, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which was earlier brought in northeastern India and later in Kashmir, is a draconian act. It is, as per democracy, I think it should be unconstitutional. It gives extrajudicial powers to the armed forces to kill, to arrest anybody they feel like, and enjoy a cover of impunity for all the human rights excesses that have been committed in Jammu and Kashmir. And as far as the Public Safety Act is concerned, that has been brought about by the state government, of course, with the blessings of New Delhi, which allows the state to put behind bars anybody on mere suspicion or mere whims for a period of 2 years. And I think this is extremely draconian, and this completely stonewalls the question of human rights violations in Kashmir. Had the Indian government been using its own constitutional laws to probe the cases of human rights excesses, I think Kashmir would not have reached a kind of situation that it is facing today.
Okay, let me add another voice to this discussion. We're now joined by Wasim Khalid, who is a journalist, and he is joining us from Kashmir now. Wasim, thanks for joining us here in The Scope. Wasim, what do you make of the current situation on the ground there in Kashmir, and of course how you reflect on the fact that Kashmiris have not yet been given their right to self-determination?
Last year has been the bloodiest in the whole of the decade. So you can yourself understand what the Kashmir is going through. The characters have changed, but the incidents and the politics is as it was 30 years ago when the armed insurgency started here. The people are continuously being arrested under the draconian laws, as our colleague Anuradha was just telling you. The Public Safety Act and other security acts which are being imposed. People are getting killed on daily basis, as happened today. One more rebel was killed while Kashmir was locked down in a snow. I mean, everything was shut, but despite that, the security operations were carried out. There were, again, the clashes were reported just today. I mean, it's just going on when I'm just talking to you. So the situation is as bad as it was 30 years ago, and I don't think so that 2019 is getting something better for us. We expect the same situation to prevail for this year as well. So as far as the right to self-determination is concerned, the two parties are ready, and the third party, like they are actually managing this Kashmir through by dint of the gun and by the use of the jackboots. So I don't think so till they will. I don't think so. I think this problem has gone beyond the management now. It can't be managed through security and through stops and concessions and through helpless mainstream politics, what we call them. Okay. I think the time has come that we should move beyond the status quoist politics and try to get some kind of resolution for the Kashmir dispute.
Very well. I'm just going to take a very short break, and we're going to be back, of course, with our esteemed guests, continuing this conversation as we talk about the 70th anniversary of that, the UN Commission giving Kashmiris the right to self-determination. We'll discuss that and a lot more right after this short break. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us here in The Scope, ladies and gentlemen. We're continuing to discuss the 70th anniversary of that UN Commission ruling that Kashmir should have the right to self-determination. Kashmiris, that is, should have the right to self-determination. We're going to add another voice to this conversation. We're joined now by Mr. Abdul Rashid Turabi, who is a member of the Legislative Assembly of Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. He's with the Jamaat-e-Islami as well. Mr. Turabi, thanks for joining us here in The Scope. Mr. Turabi, what do you make of the measures that India has brought into place in Jammu and Kashmir, specifically, of course, when it comes to Article 370, essentially eroding that article as it stands right now?
Today, right of self-determination day is being observed all over the world, and the Kashmiris are also observing this day to draw the attention of United Nations and international different fora to pay their attention on the ongoing Kashmir situation, where right of self-determination is going on, and basically this has been pledged by the international community, and also India is signatory to all those commitments which has been made by the international community through the Security Council resolutions that Kashmiris would be given right of self-determination through a plebiscite conducted under the auspices of United Nations. Since then, this peaceful movement is being crushed by the Indian forces, by the dint of force, and for the last 30 years, Kashmiris are offered more than 100,000 of their precious lives, and they have been met with brutal atrocities and destruction of wealth and every type of atrocities and brutalities by the Indian forces who are conducting their under the draconian laws. More than 700,000 troops are operating. This is the ever-against militarized zone in the world. Now it has been established at an international level. So we have been striving all over the world. Kashmir is in occupied Kashmir. Kashmir is in AJK and in diaspora. That international community should intervene, and these brutalities and atrocities should be ended, and they should be given right of self-determination.
All right, so Mr. Turabi, I will, if you allow me, on to our other guests as well, just to keep the conversation flowing. Mohammed, I wanted to bring you back in and ask you, Mohammed, as I asked Mr. Turabi there about Article 370 and the fact that many people are saying that, especially with the current state government there in Jammu and Kashmir, that article essentially of the Indian Constitution has been eroded to quite a large extent. What do you make of that?
Well, since when India and Pakistan formalized the United Nations resolutions, so both the governments were supposed to withdraw the troops. So over the Article 370 is basically defines the relationship of Indian administered Kashmir with India. In 1953, Kashmir's then Prime Minister Sheikh Abdullah was dismissed in a coup d'etat. And later, what India has been doing since that 1953 is that they have created their own actors in Kashmir, in Srinagar, which basically do the bidding of the Indian state. And what they have done is, over the years, they have not only eroded a sense of autonomy through Article 370, but also introduced laws of the Indian state inside Kashmir. Including these black laws under the garb of protecting national security. So this is how India has operated over the 7 decades through a means of creating a deceitful environment, through creating disturbances in Kashmir in the name of national security, and thus it has been eroding this Article 370 since the last 70 years. But at the same time, it has gone beyond Article 370. There cannot be any sense of governance when people are being killed and people are being put inside prisons and tortured. Because if there can be no semblance of law when there is a virtual militarized occupation happening inside Indian administered Kashmir. People wouldn't look for laws that protect them, because there are laws that actually create this notion of subhumanity among Kashmiris. Because if you look at these articles inside the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, it basically empowers the Indian military to kill, jail, arrest anyone without a sense of accountability, basically giving them a license to kill. So in a state where you have a license to kill, and then you have Article 370, which defines the relationship of Indian administered with India, an autonomous relationship which has been eroded over the years. So you can see where this all is going through. It is basically like Wasim said, it's basically managing the military occupation through these laws, while at the same time presenting a notion of governance which basically is not there on the ground. as you can see.
Okay. If I can, I'd like to bring Anuradha into that and get your opinion, Anuradha, on what's been said about Article 370 specifically. What do you think the relationship should be vis-a-vis Jammu and Kashmir in India?
I think to begin with, it would be good if they could restore the autonomy to its original position, that is pre-1952, because thereafter, as a learned lawyer and writer, Mr. A.G. Noorani has also said, the Article 370 was already reduced to a hollow tunnel, and it had been completely hollowed out through extension of central laws into Jammu and Kashmir in the most arbitrary manner. Yeah. And with the present government in New Delhi, which is a right-wing, Hindu right-wing government, and which is trying to demolish whatever little is left of that autonomy through constantly raking up questions of Article 370 and Article 35A, which define the citizenship, residentship of the citizens of Jammu and Kashmir. I think this is going to take a much more dangerous turn, because Article 370 constitutionally is also said to be the link between Jammu and Kashmir, the Indian administered Jammu and Kashmir, and New Delhi. And if you remove that, I think it would create a constitutional problem as well. Besides, I mean, it's one of the factors that promotes alienation and anger amongst the Kashmiris. Yeah. So I think it would be a good thing when we talk about dialogue, as Mr. Khalid did, the need to break the status quo. I think one of the options could be going back or introducing as a confidence-building measure reviving the kind of autonomy that the state enjoyed 70 years ago.
All right, Wasim, let me bring you back in that and ask you, do you agree with that? Do you think it's important for Article 370 to be reinstated, and what kind of an effect would that have in the current atmosphere?
Yeah, 370, actually Article 370 was introduced in 1948 when there was no Indian Parliament. There was an Indian Constituent Assembly. So they have given certain rights, certain kind of autonomy to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, by which they could have their the Indian Federal could only have a say in affairs, currency, defense, and other things. And one more thing, but what has happened over the years, it has been hollowed down, as Anuradha was saying. Now it's like an hollow shell, which is there. But it's very important that Article 370 remains there. When in 1948 it was introduced, it was subjected to that the article will later be dissolved when Kashmir will be subjected to right to self-determination, which never happened. And this article remains as it was there. So, since the Kashmir resolution is linked with the demographics of this state, if you see the pre-partition time. Yeah. So it's very important that Article 370 should remain, and people should protect it till the final resolution is arrived at. So it's very important, it should remain there. But the problem right now is that Congress and BJP are the same thing when it comes to the Article 370. If right-wing BJP has raked it like anything to garner these right-wing votes, but like Congress has it hollowed out it altogether from after 1953, as Anuradha also pointed out, like before 1953, you have your own prime minister, you have your own set of governance. But after 1953, it was the Congress-led government. So it has been like an thorn in the eye of the Indian deep state that this 370 remains is a clear obstruction for their bigger plans. So we want it, I mean, it's a common consensus among the Hurriyat, among the pro-freedom, among the other stakeholders of the Kashmir dispute, that this article should remain there as it is, and it needs to be protected and strengthened till the final resolution comes out. So this is right. That's how I see it.
Right. Let me bring Mr. Turabi in on this. Mr. Turabi, what do you make of the violence that we have seen in Kashmir? And I can use many numbers, but just in 2018, according to the numbers that are official and have come out in various media reports, at least 440 people have been killed in Jammu and Kashmir, the highest death toll, as was mentioned earlier, since 2008. Pellet guns continue to be used as well, with many, even children, losing their eyesight, including women as well. What do you make of that form of violence and the fact that it doesn't seem to be dying down, Mr. Turabi?
Actually, this is India's state policy to crush this movement by crush the will of the independence of our Kashmiri brothers and sisters, and especially youth. They are carrying out this policy of suppression and oppression and catch and kill, and they have been committing massacres, and they have destroyed property in billion of worth. But despite all these practices, those have been exercised by the Indian forces, one can see that the movement is there, and Kashmiris, and especially youth, they are not ready to give up their stance for right of self-determination. So this is a writing of war, and you should see this. After 17 years, America, with the collaboration of 48 countries of NATO, now they are confessing that they have made a fault by invading Afghanistan, and now they have decided to withdraw their troops from there. This is another writing of all. If America and NATO, they cannot win over this war in Afghanistan, and India has been trying and using its muscle and forces for decades, and Kashmiris are not going to give up their stance and give up their this moment, and they don't ready. They are not ready to live under any framework of Indian constitution, because their leaders like Sheikh Abdullah, a stalwart of that time, he was betrayed, and a personality of Indian leadership, a founding father of India, a great statesman, Nehru, who betrayed Sheikh Abdullah, and he started betraying, and he eroded the basis of Article 70. During this decade of 90, National Conference has set a committee under the chairmanship of currency to redraft the relationship, constitutional relationship with India. And there is an autonomy report that was prepared by a committee with the chairman of Karan Singh, the son of Hari Singh. So that report and those proposals and suggestions and recommendations also has been neglected by the Congress government and the BJP government.
All right. We will have to leave that as our final word, Murabi. We do, of course, appreciate the insight and analysis that you've provided in this discussion. I'd like to thank all of the guests that have spoken to us in this segment about this very important topic. From the top, we were joined by Mohammed Faisal, journalist, who was speaking to us from Istanbul. We were joined also by Wasim Khalid, who is also a journalist. He was speaking to us from Kashmir. We were joined by Anuradha Basin Jamal, who is a journalist based in Jammu. And at the end there, we were joined by Mr. Abdul Rashid Turabi, member of the Legislative Assembly of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Now, viewers, as all of our guests there spoke about, there are many aspects to what India does in Jammu and Kashmir that are important to discuss, and that being specifically laws like the Armed Forces Special Powers Act and the Public Safety Act, as well as the erosion of the powers of Article 370 as outlined in the Indian Constitution, the autonomy of Jammu and Kashmir. Indian administered Jammu and Kashmir, that is. We'll keep a very close eye, of course, on this as Kashmiris reflect on the 70th anniversary of the day that they were supposed to get their right to self-determination. That, of course, 7 decades later has not yet occurred. I'll be back with the next segment after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're still here in The Scope. In this segment, we're going to go to India, where several women have now defied a cultural norm of not entering a Hindu temple in Kerala, which bans women of menstruating age. The uproar has brought out crowds onto the streets with violence erupting and condemnations on both sides. What are the underlying political issues that may be exacerbating this issue at a time when elections are coming up? To discuss that and a lot more, we're joined now by Kavita Krishnan, who is an activist joining us from Delhi. She is the secretary of the All India Progressive Women's Association. We're also joined by Sam Daniel Stalin, who is a journalist, and he is joining us from Chennai and is the bureau chief of the NDTV Chennai. Of course, it goes without saying that all of our guests joining us in this segment or in any other segment really are speaking only in their personal capacity and are not speaking on behalf of any specific organization or company. Kavita, I'd like to start with you, if I may. I wanted to get your thoughts because there are obviously a lot of aspects here, Kavita, about your thoughts about this entire controversy surrounding these women going into this very specific temple.
Yes, what you're witnessing right now in Kerala, I should say, is a violent attempt to bolster up a Brahminical patriarchy. And it's a political attempt. Let's be very clear about that. This is not some kind of social rebellion against a Supreme Court judgment. This is very much a politically motivated violence that is being fomented against a Supreme Court verdict that has allowed women entry into the Sabarimala shrine. I want to also just mention the facts here quickly, which is that women used to have entry into the Sabarimala shrine till 1991. And it was when some man approached the Kerala court that the Kerala court then outlawed women's entry because they were persuaded that general women are not going and only certain privileged women are being allowed entry. So they stopped entry. So they stopped the entry into that shrine. Now the Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court judgment has done has been to actually change the premises of that verdict to say that it is women's constitutional right to prevent women entry on the grounds that women are polluting or that the presence of little girls as young as 10 or women up to the age of 50 can break the celibacy of a celibate god is actually amounting to untouchability, and it's therefore a violation of the constitutional fundamental rights of women, which is what the Supreme Court argued. And now the Kerala government is a left government there, which is implementing the Supreme Court order. And in an attempt to somehow dislodge a left party from power over there, from the government over there, the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is India's ruling party, and as well as the main opposition party in India, which is the Congress party, these are basically united there in trying to foment violence and create a controversy where there is none.
Yeah. Okay, so let me bring Sam on this, because Sam, I wanted to ask if you agree with Kavita's take there. Is this more about politics than anything else?
Well, there is so much of politics in this, no doubt, because if you look at the ruling pattern in the state of Kerala, it's largely the Congress and the left governments who have been capturing power one after the other.
Yeah.
And at the moment, the BJP, which is ruling in many states in the northern part of India, besides ruling the country at the central level, they're also trying to capture power in Kerala, where they have a very negligible presence. And this issue has come to them as a huge opportunity to mobilize support, to use it as a kind of unifying force to expand their presence in that particular state. So every party, including the left government, which is in power there, have their own political angle or political agenda towards that. The two national parties which have been in power, which are trying to capture power once again in Kerala, the BJP and the Congress, they both technically are siding or supporting those groups which oppose the entry of women for two reasons. One, the BJP thinks this will help them to break new grounds in the state. Secondly, the Congress, which has been in power in the state for a long time, doesn't want to antagonize the larger faithfuls in the state, although the Supreme Court has paved way for entry of women, and citing that they have moved a review petition challenging the Supreme Court's order earlier. They say they want a consensus before women are allowed, or wait till the Supreme Court hears their review petition.
Right.
And although the left government in Kerala, at a superficial level, in the beginning, in the initial stages, 3 months before, when the Sabrimala season first began after the Supreme Court order, although they appear to be very much committed to pave way for the entry of women, it took them really almost 4 months to make sure women would enter. Earlier, many would say they did everything possible to give a perception that they are doing everything possible to allow women into the temple, but on the ground, they made sure that did not happen, citing various reasons, including the law and order problem. And it was only last week, for various reasons, they made sure that women would be allowed, and the police escorted the women early in the morning before the protesters could gather, and made sure the women were able to offer praise. Before that, over the last 3 or 4 months, there were at least a dozen women who unsuccessfully tried. The closest they could come near was the entrance of the temple. And at that point in time, many analysts also believed that perhaps the ruling left government in Kerala was worried about the repercussions in terms of its erosion of vote bank if women were allowed. That's why it was treading very cautiously, giving an appearance as if it's doing everything possible, but on the ground, playing to the gallery and making sure women wouldn't be allowed. But now it has made sure women would be allowed, and for the second time, it has ensured that women would be escorted and made sure they enter the sanctum sanctorum.
Okay, I just want to take a quick time out, if you both allow me, and I wanted to, we have a clip, an excerpt, I should say, from a BBC report about this specific topic, and there's an important soundbite there which we want to play, and then we'll be back and get both of your reactions on that soundbite as well.
I'm a law teacher, and I teach the constitutional principles and constitutional morality. Our Part 3 of the Constitution gave many rights to our citizens of India, and one of the important right is equality. And the things happened in Sabrimala is violation of equality. And I like to establish or implement the judgment given by Supreme Court.
And you are prepared to face the consequences of it?
Yes, definitely.
What do you think are the consequences of your visit there?
I may killed by the people. Maybe.
Do you fear for your life?
No fear. Most of the people from our democratic society give support. Most of the devotees give support. Because of that, they are also declared their support.
All right, there are a very powerful soundbite there of a woman talking about her right to enter the Sabrimala temple. Of course, her rights given under the Constitution of India, rights of equality. Kavita, I'd like to bring you back in here. How important is that specifically, and I'm talking here in the context of this women's wall that we saw in Kerala. It was the 4th largest human chain ever in a span of 24 hours. Millions of women lined the streets for what they said was gender justice. What are your thoughts on that, Kavita?
Yes, in fact, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I think that, it's absolutely right, of course, that the various parties in Kerala have a political angle, and so does the ruling left, so do the ruling left parties, the CPIM and the CPI. But I think that, there are different kinds of politics that people have an option of doing, right? And at this point, India's main ruling party, the BJP, as well as India's main opposition party, the Congress, are united in Kerala in trying to mobilize on a plank of supporting Brahminical patriarchy, which practices untouchability towards women. On the other hand, I think that I admire the fact that the left parties, the CPIM and the CPI, and left forces and progressive forces and organizations and Dalit and Adivasi groups and feminist groups in general have worked together, in fact, to build this anti-patriarchal, anti-Brahminical politics, where they have mobilized millions of women on the streets to say that this entry of women into Sabrimala is actually something that is in line with a whole lot of protests like Dalit entry into temples, like the lifting of the fight to lift the prohibition of women from upper castes wearing blouses to cover the upper part of their bodies. All of these things are gains that will be rolled back if we start saying now that women should not be allowed to enter Sabrimala. This work was that. So I agree that for 4 months, it's true that women could not enter till the 2nd of January.
Yeah.
But I feel that this hard work that has been done on the ground to make sure that this women's wall happened, to display that this is not just some abstract Supreme Court judgment hanging somewhere and being imposed on a reluctant people, but that it is a move that is supported by the progressive people of Kerala, by women in their lakhs in Kerala, is something which has been demonstrated by the women's wall and the politics that underpins the women's wall. And I think that it's high time we had more feminist politics in the subcontinent than in India, isn't it? Rather than always witnessing pro-Brahminical, pro-patriarchal politics.
Okay, let me put that to Sam. Do you agree with that? Do you think that this is, in fact, more about women's rights than in fact, just about politics?
Absolutely. Kerala has always been known to be a very progressive state. It has been boasting of a very high literacy rate, and the kind of opposition to women's entry into a temple over the last 4 months was largely seen to be un-Kerala, and many believed it was largely politically motivated. And yes, it's now again taking the question of faith versus law to another step forward. And in issues of faith, will customs prevail or will the rule of law prevail? And in that sense, the court has clearly given a verdict that women of all ages ought to be allowed into this temple, and there's no reason why, on citing their menstrual status, they should be denied. And despite political opposition, the recent show of strength by lakhs of women, that reflects, in many would say, the real spirit of Kerala. And I think it's a good beginning in that sense, making sure that women of all ages ought to be allowed at this temple to begin with. And interestingly, this could also raise several other questions, several other bias in other religions, perhaps. And in that sense, for gender justice, gender equality, in questions of faith, in questions of worship, at places of worship, I think this could be a good precedent in that sense, to pave way for such barriers to be broken for women and to ensure justice, particularly gender justice.
Okay, so Kavita, I want for a moment give the point of view of the BJP specifically, and there's a BJP supporter, he's a space scientist, and I hope I get his name right, Madhavan Nair, I believe, and he has given out a statement about what's happened there in Kerala, and he has said essentially that this is, in his words, a trivial issue. Which seemingly, the left-leaning government, I should say, in Kerala is using to distract from the fact that, ever since those floods came into the state and the damage from those floods has not yet remained fixed, and areas have not been properly reconstructed yet, that this is essentially being used as some sort of a distraction tactic, that this is not, the most important issue that Kerala faces. What do you make of that, Kavita?
See, I think the issue is absolutely not trivial, because how can women's fundamental rights be trivial, right? And I want to quickly point out here that the issue is not just about menstruating women entering temples. It's a little wider than that. And it has an impact even on those women who are not devotees, who are not going to go to Sabarimala, perhaps. It affects every woman in Kerala and in India. I'll tell you why. Because the logic for refusing entry to women was that Ayyappa, the deity of Sabarimala, is a male celibate god, and that because his celibacy would get broken by the very presence of female people from between the ages of 10 and 50. What does that mean? Let's break that down, right? It means that it is not respecting, it's going back to the 19th century pre-age of consent period, where a 10-year-old girl was considered, she'd entered puberty, and so therefore she was considered marriageable and a sexual object. It makes all women into sexual objects, and it promotes the idea that whether it's human men or gods, their celibacy and their sexuality is not their responsibility. It can be provoked by the very presence of a woman. So it actually spreads rape culture. And I want to say that while there's a conservative, politically right-wing organization that has approached the Supreme Court for a review petition, there is also a Ayyappa Bhakt, an Ayyappa devotee, a woman who is also the mother of a 14-year-old girl, who has also approached the Supreme Court to say that I support this decision. And I don't want my daughter to be looked at as a sexual object. What are you teaching little girls and women? And I don't want, and this is an insult to my God, to suggest that he needs women to be absent from his presence in order to maintain his celibacy. So this is actually something that affects women broadly.
Right. Okay, point. So Sam, I wanted to, if I can, bring us back to that, the discussion of the political nature of all of this, if I may. Do you agree with Mr. Nair, who had said, as I put to Kavita, that this is a trivial issue, that Kerala's government is trying to distract from the fact that ever since those floods came into the state, that it has not done its duty to rebuild and reconstruct? Is this a deflection, essentially, of that?
I wouldn't agree on that. Yes, Kerala suffered huge devastation following the recent floods, and the state is rebuilding in a sense. Several states got underwater. Several lakh people were rendered homeless, and they had lost their lifetime savings. And that's a huge challenge. And many would say the Kerala government did a good job in terms of mobilizing support, creating a great website, and tackling both in terms of initial relief and long-term program, putting in place a long-term program in terms of rebuilding Kerala in that sense. And it's a huge challenge. No one is underplaying or downplaying that. Yeah. And they had asked for a huge aid from the central government, which had granted a part of it. And it's going to be a long-term effort for the state government. But I don't think the government is trying to use this issue to deflect attention. No. But it's certainly, since the order has come from the Supreme Court, and you are also known to be fairly rationalist government, it becomes all the more important for the party, for the ruling left government in Kerala, to ensure that they follow the Supreme Court order in letter and spirit, and they don't get they don't buckle under pressure from their political opponents. Initially, I would say the Kerala government was not so committed. They would say they were devising their own strategy towards ensuring entry of women at the temple. But I think the larger point, the larger question you're asking, whether it's an attempt by the Kerala government to deflect from the floods, I would say no.
Okay, so Kavita, I wanted to give you a final word, if I may, and ask you, see the kinds of violence that erupt in such cases. And, we've seen politicians' homes attacked. I believe it was a BJP. A politician whose ancestral home was, I believe, attacked. Party workers of all sides have been attacked as well as others, of course, just lay people. They're out on the streets. And of course, there is seemingly a fear that the women themselves are in danger, especially those who have visited this temple. What do you make of that violence that we've seen and the fact that I imagine adds to polarization, does it not?
Yeah, two things here. One is that absolutely, I think it's a great concern, the threat of violence. We've all been worrying about like anything in the wake of this. And I want to point out here that the President Amit Shah of the ruling BJP, the BJP that rules India, had actually made statements basically inciting violence on the issue of Sabarimala. BJP leaders in Kerala made statements saying that women who enter Sabarimala should be torn into pieces and the pieces should be sent to the Supreme Court and so on and so forth. So there's been a lot of inciting of violence that's happened. And that is a great concern. And I think it's a great challenge for the government to ensure that violence is contained and that the situation remains under control. But the other thing I would like to also quickly say here is that Kerala does have a problem of political violence. And even the left party, which is in power, the CPIM, is also been involved in acts of political violence. This is apart from Sabarimala. So I just want to put that in perspective here to say that, yes, political violence is also a problem. And that should not become, on the pretext of Sabarimala, there shouldn't be another kind of, cycle of political violence that goes on and doesn't end. I hope that can be averted. I hope that society can firmly rebuff any forces that are trying to foment violence in the support of patriarchy and Brahminism, and that basically that Kerala can move on and take this in its stride as it should.
Very well. We'll leave there at that as our forward, but of course we appreciate both of your contributions and your analysis on this situation there in Kerala regarding that Sabarimala temple and the women who have entered it, defying a ban that had been in place, but the Supreme Court siding with them at this point in time. Let me thank our guests. We were speaking to Kavita Krishnan, their activist, speaking to us live from Delhi. She's the secretary of the All India Progressive Women's Association. We also had J. Sam Daniel Stalin, journalist, speaking to us live from Chennai. He is the bureau chief of NDTV Chennai. And just again to reiterate, both of our guests were speaking in their personal capacities, not on behalf of any specific organizations. Obviously, viewers, our guests there got through a lot of different aspects, both the political and possibly cultural aspects of this situation there regarding women of menstruating age entering this specific and other specific such temples in the country. But obviously there are some political aspects as well, as I said, regarding the left-wing government in power in Kerala versus a more right-wing government, federal government that is, such as the BJP. We know that the BJP will even lead a march to the Secretariat on January 15th. So this is certainly not the end of this story. This story will probably further develop, and we may very well see more violence and more controversy in the coming days regarding this situation. We'll leave it there for now, though, and we'll keep a close eye on this. As I said, I've been Waqar Rizvi, and this has been Scope.